welcome to another vlog. If you saw my other vlog, then you will probably be expecting this one, but I vlogged my reading process for A Court of Thorns and Roses, so naturally I'm vlogging my reading process for A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I'm filming this little intro a little way into it. We have already started and I have already filmed some clips, but it was bad lighting because I was reading it at night time, so I thought I'd just film the intro now and say, hi, this is what I'm doing, again, same as I did with the other one. If you haven't read the books, don't watch these videos because spoilers. I hope you enjoy. So it's time to start A Court of Mist and Fury, and I'm about to do that right now. So in the prologue and in chapter 1 we pretty much see how damaged Feyre is and how she's not sure she's going to recover, that she's up in the night being sick and having nightmares, and Tamlin does as well, but neither of them really comfort each other. They just kind of ignore each other as if not acknowledging it will make it go away, and that's not right, is it? They should be comforting each other and stuff. You shouldn't just be ignoring her laying there awake when she's in the bathroom vomiting because of her nightmares, do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I've just got to the bit where we meet Ianthe, I say Ianthe, so I'm gonna stick with that really. And she said that Ianthe is pretty much her saviour during this time because she's the one telling her who everyone is and what everyone means, and she's the one helping her pick out the dresses and the wreaths and stuff and all the silverware because she really doesn't care, but she's not allowed to do anything except like wedding planning and stuff, so Ianthe's doing it all for her. And Feyre's just said, I was in no position to doubt. She hadn't led me astray yet. Is that some foreshadowing or what? She hasn't led me astray yet. It's gonna happen. She is an evil bitch. Hiya! My hair looks rough and the lighting is terrible because it's like the middle of the night, but I'm reading some ACOMAF and I thought I would just update you because I read a couple of chapters without filming anything. The whole beginning of this book, I feel like there's not really much to talk about. It is just Feyre being scared and having nightmares and everyone ignoring her pretty much and telling her to do things that she doesn't want to do. But I've read up to the beginning of chapter 6 now, and she was supposed to get married in chapter 4, I believe, and obviously Rhys turned up at the end with her shouting, no, down the bond, bargain bond, mating bond, She doesn't know yet, obviously, that doesn't happen for a long time. Rhys has shown up to save her because she begged to be saved by anyone, and she's thrown the shoe at his head, which I think is brilliant. And she's said that the Night Court is the most beautiful place she's ever seen, and that her room is fit for an empress, and that clearly she's a guest, not a prisoner, and really, it's all just lovely. And she said, what do you want with me this week? And he said, this week I want you to learn how to read. So he's really just being a really nice guy, because that's what he is. So it's already really lovely. He's kind of explained the bond and how she could have shields against it and stuff, but she doesn't want to agree to anything with him because that felt too personal. So she's not agreeing to be trained yet. We're reading the Night Court. And, you know, I feel like we haven't read a lot, whereas with the other book, we'd read loads and nothing had happened. Here we're only 5 chapters in and she's already in the Night Court. Thank God, because her and Tamlin are just so wrong. So I've just finished chapter 6 and I feel like lots of interesting stuff happened. We met more. Rhys has been teaching Feyre to read and to bring her shields up and down in her mind and stuff, and they kind of had that confrontation about him saying that he doesn't believe that she's happy or whatever. Pretty much they had a little confrontation about him saying to her, I'm not your enemy, and her saying, Tamlin thinks you are, everyone else thinks you are. And he says, did you even tell them what I did to you? Because he didn't do anything to her, he actually helped. And he confronts her about not talking about it because it's so much easier to just pretend that it never happened and let them coddle her, and she says, I don't let them coddle me. And he's like, oh, you were wrapped up like a present when you arrived. Imagine what you'll be like when you've had little heirs, and imagine what Ianthe will do and stuff. And pretty much he's just familiar with all of her fears and why she's got reservations about marrying Tamlin. And so I've just read the whopper that is chapter 7, and that chapter could definitely have been broken up because a lot happened. So we start off with Rhys saying, like, war's coming, and Feyre's all like, no, don't invade, please don't invade the humans. And he's like, shut up, I'm not going to invade the humans. The King of Highland's going to invade the humans, and is going to break down the wall, and blah 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 blah. Which we obviously know is an imminent threat, because it happens in the next one. But blah 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 blah. That happens. There's mention of Cassian and Asriel, so they're about, but we haven't met them, but there's mention of them through more. Rhys pretty much says to her, like, you could potentially have these powers. You need to train, you need to learn, you could be a weapon. And this, I think, is one of my, like, favourite passages from this book. It's quite early, but it's one that, like, has stuck with me a little bit, because I think it really shows a brilliant side of Rhys's character, how he gets quite aggressive with her, but he knows what's best stuff, but there's still that kind of sort of protectiveness, but fear, and you'll know what I mean. It's the passage where he says, Tamlin isn't your keeper and you know it. She says, I'm his subject and he is my high lord. And Rhys says, you are no one's subject. I will say this once and only once. You can be a pawn, be someone's reward, and spend the rest of your immortal life bowing and scrapping and pretending you're less than him, than Ianthe, than any of us. If you want to pick that road, then fine. A shame, but it's your choice. But I know you, more than you realise, I think. And I don't believe for one damn minute that you're remotely fine with being a pretty trophy for someone who sat on his ass for nearly 50 years and sat on his ass while you were shredded apart. Or, you've got another choice. You can master whatever powers we gave to you and make it count. You can play a role in this war, because war is coming one way or another. And do not try to delude yourself that any of the Fae will give a shit about your family across the wall when our whole territory is likely to become a charnel house. I love that bit a lot. He's just so right. And I think that really snaps something in Feyre, because then later in this chapter, when she goes back to the Spring Court, she feels so uncomfortable. Like, she gets there and she thinks that she wants to, like, take Tamlin to bed, and Tamlin's like, no, I need to interrogate you. And she's like, what? I've just got back, I didn't realise I was a spy. And he's like, no, we need to do this. This is for everyone's safety, because you have been granted access to our enemy's lands, and no one comes out alive and stuff. And she starts spouting information, and I think she does feel a little bit guilty about it. Then she remembers that Rhys is evil and Rhys could have tampered with her mind, and then she continues spouting information. I'm not sure she's comfortable with it. Like, she's kind of defending Rhys, like, I might have those abilities, I could help, I could be a weapon, I could use my powers against it, and Tamlin's like, no, no, no. And then she goes back to saying, like, he was my high lord, the shield and defender of his people, of me, and if keeping me safe meant that his people could continue to hope and build a new life, that he could do the same, I could bow to him on this one thing. But it's not bowing to him on this one thing. She bows to him on absolutely everything, because she thinks that she's not worthy of anything, and she just gives in to him at all points, and she's not okay with that. Which takes us back to what Rhys said about, like, you can bow down and stuff, but you're not okay with that. And she's not okay with that. So, I've just finished reading chapter 8, which is the chapter of the tithe, where Tamlin demands payment from everyone in the Spring Court for his services and protection, which is honestly just a load of bollocks, isn't it? As Feyre so wonderfully points out, because she gives the water fairy thing her jewellery because she can't afford to pay, and then goes back, and Tamlin's like, what have you done? You're ruining everything, Blair. You can't just go against the rules, you make us look weak, you make us look this, that and the other. And she snaps and she's like, you have no idea what it feels like to be starving and not be able to live comfortably, and I'm not taking the chance that she feels like that, because I know what it feels like, and we don't need all this stuff. I never wear a piece of jewellery twice, so I was never going to wear it again, so she can have it to pay it, because she needs it more than I do. And Tamlin freaks out and is an arse, which is nothing exceptional, really, is it? Also what happens in this chapter is Feyre manages to get into Lucien's head, and she says, oh, like, I know who that gift came from, and she feels a bit sick and stuff, but she's done it, so she knows she has it, and she felt like scorch marks in the table, etc. So she is starting to know she's definitely got these powers that Rhys spoke of, and she is going to need to learn how to use them. Feyre, Feyre. She's said, like, I'm drowning and I can't cope and you need to marry someone that can deal with this because I can't. And then he goes crazy. The window shattered, the furniture splintered, and that box of paints and brushes and paper, it exploded into dust and glass and wood. She's saying that she can't cope with it because she can't cope with it and she's not okay with it, and he knows that now. This is like the total opposite of what happened with ACOTAR. We're only 100 pages in, literally exactly 100 pages in, so a tiny little sliver really compared to the whole thing. And so much has happened in so little time. The pacing of this is definitely more than the pacing of ACOTAR. And the more I'm reading, I know I'm still in that first bit, we're not even like properly at the Night Court yet, but still, it's just such a step up from ACOTAR and I'm loving it again, as I knew I would. So I've just finished chapter 10 after Tamlin's just destroyed the study, and Feyre says, like, he apologised and he put her mouth to her skin and apologised because that's the only way they can communicate, skin to skin. And then she says how he worshipped her body for the following few days, but that had never been the hard part. Everything else had been the hard part. So she's kind of noticing that their relationship is falling apart. And she says that she goes days without speaking to anyone and just hides in the library and doesn't do anything. Then Rhys has shown up again and Tamlin's trying to get rid of him. And this is another quote that I quite like. Rhys merely raised a brow. I already have everything I want. He stepped around Tamlin as if he were a mere piece of furniture and took my hand. I like that bit. She's clearly falling apart. Like, she stays in bed until lunch, so she's not eating. Rhys says, like, you're not eating, are you short of food or something? Because she's wasting away to nothing and no one's helping her, and I can't find it, but somewhere she says, like, the thought of that, like, open, airy room in the Night Court is better than being cooped up in the library. So she's liking the idea of being in the Night Court more because she's just more free, and she's feeling really constrained and trapped, and Tamlin's trying, but he's not trying very hard. And I've just read chapter 11 where she spends a very quick week at the Night Court and doesn't do much, doesn't eat much, doesn't play much, and Rhys says, like, she says she can feel through the bond Rhys saying, like, play with me, come on, do something. And she's sensing that he's worried, but she's just not there. She's not in herself. She doesn't care. She's just gone. And Rhys has just, well, not Rhys, Moore has just saved her from the Spring Court. Tamlin obviously put the shields up around everything, and Rhys broke it, and Moore went in to take her away, and they did everything by the books, so he hasn't stolen her or anything. But I noticed some bits in this chapter from Ianthe saying about her being stolen for breeding purposes, and Rhys is exactly the sort of monster that would do that, and Ianthe knows that she's talking crap because she knows exactly what he's like, as we learn later on, because she tried to seduce him at one point. Tamlin was just really undermining throughout this. Like, you can't even make it through the night. You can't stand being around other people. You're more of a hindrance than anything. We don't need you. And he's just gone against everything that he promised her to start with. She took herself into darkness and melted her ring off, and here is where things get interesting. I'm now at part 2, the House of Wind. That last chapter there was beautiful. She's really appreciating the fact that she's free, she's not trapped in the Spring Court, and she's actually said, like, I can't go back. And Rhys has, like, given her information about things that she's had kept from her for so long from Tamlin. And when she asks to go with him to whatever he's doing, he just says, like, if you do come with me, you can't tell anyone anything about anything that you see. But he's not saying no, and he takes her. And she's given freedom that she so desperately wants and desperately needs. And then she's in the townhouse in Valeri's. This scene so much reminds me of their reuniting in A Court of Wings and Ruin. Like, when she goes back to the townhouse and she's in the, like, front hallway bit and she is being reunited with them all, and then when she sees Rhys she just collapses with pure emotion and can't contain herself because she's so happy to see him, and it's just so fantastic. This really reminds me of that. Just because it's the first time she's seeing it, it's the first time that she's going to that townhouse and seeing the bookcases and a house that's lived in and loved in by a family. And it's actually quite emotional, because I'm thinking, like, Feyre, you're going to get that. Like, you're going to have that loving family in a house living together fantastically. It's so great. Hi, lighting is really bad because it's late at night. But I've just read chapter 15, which is the chapter where Rhys suggests a thought for a thought, and he gives his thoughts about being scared that he would never see Valeris again, and wishing he was the one that killed Amarantha, and fearing that if war comes he will never spend a night like that again. And then Feyre gives her thoughts of being a fool in love, and she fell in love with the first thing that showed her a hint of kindness, and maybe that worked for who she was before, but it doesn't work for who she is now. And it's cute. It's sad, but it's also cute because she's realising that he's not what she wants, what she needs, what's good for her. And perhaps the Night Court and Valeris is. I just finished chapter 16, which was, oh my god, a whopper. That was enormous. But that was the chapter where Feyre goes to dinner with the inner circle and meets them all properly and gets to know a bit of background on them all. And it was long, but we learned like an awful lot in that chapter. And she speaks about seeing something in Moore and knowing that they could be friends, like Moore could be her first real friend, and Moore gives her like that encouragement of, you're not in the Spring Court and it's up to you what you do, like you do what you need, etc, etc. And it's all lovely, and she's agreed to work with them, and she's potentially agreed to let Cassian train her, and yeah. And at the very end of this chapter they mention going to see the bone carver, and obviously the bone carver looks like the little boy to Feyre, and in this book she doesn't know, but in the second one we learn that it's hers and Rhys's son. How cute. I've just read chapters 17 and 18, and there has been so much mention of this bond between them, and it's not referred to as the bargain, it's referred to as the bond. There's been lots of like hints of Rhys's emotions as well, him being scared for her. We've been through the part where he wakes her in the night from that dream that she had, and he reassures her that it was a dream, it's okay, and then he holds her hair back while she's being sick. So yeah, that's happened. He's explained the whole ranking system of his court, and yeah, just sweet things between Rhys and Feyre, really. Him like noticing her emotions and like feeling sorry for her and worried about her, and you can just tell that he cares an awful lot. And we've just had the prison scene meeting the bone carver, which obviously to Feyre appears as an 8-year-old boy, which happens to be their son at a later date, but we aren't aware of that yet. And he's fed them the information about Hybern and the Queens and stuff. I've just finished chapter 19, and I don't have much to say other than the very last little bit, which is when... So they've just agreed that she's going to go to the Weaver to get Rhys's item that she has the same imprint as, or whatever. And the very last little passage is Feyre saying, "So I'm your huntress and thief." His hand slid down to cup the backs of my knees as he said, with a roguish grin, "You're my salvation, Feyre." I like that quote. That's all I had to say. I've just finished chapter 21, and it feels like we learn an awful lot in that chapter. So that was the chapter where Feyre... Oh, I'd finished chapter 20 as well, but I didn't film because it was a small one. So Feyre went to the Weaver, and she got the ring, and that whole thing happened, and she learnt to control her panic, and she thinks that the ring is just a stupid test, and then Rhys is like, "Oh, it's my mother's, she took it away from me so that I wouldn't waste it." And she just thinks it's stupid, but it's not. It's really meaningful, and it had to be a woman that could handle getting the ring, and she did, and it's sweet, but obviously she doesn't know that yet. And then there was also like a bit of flirting between them, and he said to her like, "Oh, did you like the sight of me on my knees before you?" And then we've also just learned about the Ianthe thing about her trying to force herself on Rhys and Rhys crushing her hand and then making her leave. And that reminds us an awful lot of what happens in ACOMAF when Feyre crushes her hand after she's tried to force herself on someone. Oh, something else I wanted to say from these chapters is that where Feyre's in the Weavers is the little passage where she says, "I was not a pet, not a doll, not an animal. I was a survivor and I was strong. I would not be weak or helpless again. I could not be broken, tamed." And it's where she's comparing herself to a wolf a lot. I just read 3 chapters up to chapter 25, and a fair bit has happened. We've gone to the mortal realm and met Feyre's sisters as Fae, because obviously she's Fae and it's the first time she's seeing them, and they've agreed to let them use the house as a meeting point for the queens and to send a letter and stuff. There were a couple of bits that I saw that I wanted to mention, and one of them was how adorable it was when Feyre was like describing Rhys, saying like he'd dimmed himself, there was no longer that like night hovering around him, and she said that despite him dimming himself from the violet twinkle in his eyes, there was no chance that anyone would see him as anything but extraordinary, and I thought that was really adorable. We've also had the part where Moore says to Feyre, "There are good days and hard days, don't let the hard days win," and that's obviously adorable. And we've just had Rhys and Feyre at their room at Feyre's family's manor, her saying when her birthday was and her remembering that he was the only one that ever bet on her and stuff, and it's just nice, isn't it? There was mention of Tamlin and how she was kind of not confused, but she was just clarifying like Tamlin was good, he was never evil, but he was good, but after what happened under the mountain he changed and maybe he was more destroyed than she was and blah blah blah. So she's still having those like thoughts, but she's definitely getting much more comfortable with them all. And there was also her saying how she remembered the feel of Rhys's hands on her thighs because she's thinking about it. So I've just read up to chapter 28, so I've read another 3 chapters. And in these 3 chapters we see the introduction of the little handwritten notes between them and the shameful flirting. And it's adorable, because everything they do is adorable. They started training, so they've just been at Feyre's human family home. And it's their day off, and Rhys has taken her out into the woods to train her with her powers, and he left her alone, and the Ator came and tried to take her away, and then Rhys came and Asriel came and took the Ator away, and Feyre freaked out because she was like, "You can't just use me as bait for him so you can find the Ator," and she gets all pissy about it, and he apologises. They have their fight first. They have a fight and she winnows without really knowing that she can do it. She's just like so enraged and wants to punch him in the face that she just winnows in front of him and punches him, tackles him to the ground, and then she's all like, "Don't you ever use me as bait again." And then he's apologising and he says, "Sorry, let's have breakfast and go home," and she says, "Valeria's isn't my home," and Rhysand's little heart breaks a little bit. That makes me really sad, because Valeria's is obviously her home, as we learn later on. We're getting there. She'll know soon enough. It just isn't quite soon enough for my liking. Chapter 28 has passed, and pretty much everything memorable that happens in that chapter is Feyre writes a letter to the Spring Court to say, "I left with my own free will, I'm not coming back, don't come looking for me." Rhys lets Feyre into his mind again to see the torturing of the Ator so that they can know what the Ator knows, and Feyre has agreed to go out for the night with Rhys and everyone, and Amren's just told Feyre that the pendant thing that she took to the prison didn't actually have any magic. So yeah, 29, here we come. I'm afraid you're just gonna have to deal with the really poor lighting right now, because I'm in bed and it's dark and the lamp is just over there. So also I might be a bit quieter than usual because I'm in bed and it's late. But I've just got up to chapter 31, and the part I've just read was absolutely beautiful. And it was when Cassian was training Feyre to fight in like hand-to-hand combat, teaching her to punch, and she burned through the pad with her rage and stuff because she was arguing with herself in her head about everything to do with herself, and she just cried and said, I killed them, it should have been me, blah blah blah. And then Rhys came over and explained his nightmares and apologised for not being able to save her, and wrapped his wings around her and then enveloped them in that darkness. And Feyre talks about the darkness like it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen, but it's so like calming. And she says, here in the soothing sparkling dark, a steady breath filled my lungs. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done such a thing. Breathed easily. It was so calming and beautiful and lovely. Feyre went out to dinner with them all at night time, and Rhys took her on a walk through Valerie's, and it was adorable, as is everything that they do. But yeah, that little bit there of them in the darkness was beautiful. Oh, we've also had another note sharing thing where he says to her, oh, come and lick my wounds for me, or lick me everywhere, or whatever he says. And yeah, that was all very flirty. I've just read chapter 31, and this is the chapter where he says that words come back from the summer court and they are going to go and try and find the Book of Breathings. But the one important part that I've seen in this is at the very end, when Rhys and Feyre are flirting, and Feyre says, my mouth went a bit dry, but flirting with him, fighting with him, it was easy, fun. Maybe I deserved both of those things. You haven't been able to keep away from me since Calamne, it seems. Something rippled in his eyes that I couldn't place, but he flicked my nose, blah 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 blah. Yeah, of course he hasn't been able to keep away, because that's when he saw you in person for the first time, when he'd been dreaming about you for, like, the past 50 years. Not 50 years, because you haven't been alive for 50 years, but the past, like, 5 years or something. Because he loves you, and you're his mate. Finished chapter 32, and they're in the summer court, and Feyre's trying to play the part that Rhys wants her to play, and not much has happened yet because they've literally only just arrived. I just finished chapter 33 where they're having dinner with the summer court, and Feyre says to Tarquin it would be easy to fall in love with you, and she's genuinely believing that he's a wonderful person, easy to fall in love with, easy to be a friend. And then she sees Rhys and Cressida, the princess of the summer court, flirting, and her holding his hand and whispering in his ear and stuff, and she gets jealous and doesn't understand why. Well, she does understand why. She's lonely and unhappy, and she knew they were flirting, but she wasn't sure if it meant anything more than that. And now she's horrifically jealous of Cressida and wants to throttle her for no good reason. But obviously we'll see what happens with them later. I've just finished chapter 34, and this is where we have the famous end line, to the people who look at the stars and wish, Rhys. To the stars who listen, and the dreams that are answered. It's just so cute. So in this chapter, Feyre's been having her tour with Tarquin. Tarquin's shown her the treasure troves and gifted her the black diamond necklace, which really did sound quite spectacular. And then there was that confrontation between Rhys and Feyre where they're both jealous of each other. Well, not of each other, but Rhys is jealous of Tarquin and Feyre's jealous of Cressida. I really don't know how to pronounce her name, but her. And Feyre says, he picked up his glass, his gaze so piercing that I wondered why I'd bothered blushing at all for Tarquin. Because she has just hopelessly fallen for him, really, hasn't she? And I've just finished chapter 35, where she violates Tarquin completely and infiltrates his mind to convince him to let her to go to the temple, where she has now discovered that the book resides. So yeah, that's pretty much all that happens in that chapter, but things are about to get more interesting now because they are about to try and get it. I've just finished chapter 36, and Feyre's taken the lead box with the half of the Book of Breathings off the pedestal, and it said in that cruel ancient voice, liar, because she's not who she said she was, and the doors slammed. And obviously I'm now about to go into chapter 37 where the water fairy thing is gonna come and save her. Yay. I finished chapter 37 and they got the books and they're back in Valeri's and they're telling the story to everyone else and the water wraith saved them and all is good and happy, and Rhys has told Amren that the book could potentially have the spell to send her home. So a happiness, I suppose, but they're probably quite soon about to get the blood rubies from the summer court. I've just finished chapter 38 and in this chapter the blood rubies are indeed delivered, so there's now a price on all of their lives. And pretty much the only remarkable thing that happens... Oh no, there's a couple of things actually. One, the blood rubies. Two, is when Rhys sends the, daydream, I suppose, the thought of her in the lacy underthings shop and makes her walk into a post because she's thinking of what would have potentially happened in that shop between them. And then at the end is Rhys's nightmare and she goes into his room to wake him and slap him and beat him until he wakes up, pretty much. And he reveals that he has the nightmares as often as she does, and that's all very sweet, and he's naked and she tries her best not to look, and she sees the mountain tattoos on his knees, which I'm guessing we will find out the meaning of soon enough. I've just finished chapter 39 and Rhys and Feyre have been exchanging their little paper notes. She asked what the tattoo on his knee means and he says that it meant that he would kneel before nothing but his crown, etc. And now they're meeting the queens in Feyre's family home. Just finished chapter 40 and the only notable thing to say is that the immortal queens are all bitches. I've just finished chapter 41 and in this chapter we learn of Miriam and Drakon and their story, and we also hear of Moore's backstory, which is really sad, where she has the note nailed to her about being Eris's problem now because she was supposed to be sold off in marriage. He's also said to her, I'm debating asking you to stay here tomorrow while I have to go to the Court of Nightmares because I don't want you to see who I have to be. And she says, oh, you have to put that mask of the High Lord on, I trust you, it's okay. And then they held hands, which was really sweet and kind of uncalled for, because Rhys says, I don't want you to see that side of me because you've only just started looking at me like I'm not a monster. And then I took Rhys's hand and his thumb brushed against the back of my palm. I tried not to think about the ease of that stroke. They just naturally held hands and started stroking each other's hands, and isn't that the sweetest thing ever? That chapter ends with tell me what I need to do tomorrow. So chapter 42, which I will be reading tomorrow, obviously we're going to the Court of Nightmares, and we know what happens there, don't we? I've just finished chapter 42, and that is the chapter where Rhys takes Feyre to the Court of Nightmares and has her play the role of his pet, his whore, and dresses her up in barely anything and pretty much publicly touches her body as a distraction while Azriel goes to get the orb thing. And Feyre is having a mental battle about how much she actually really does want him. Always a pleasure to read those scenes with Rhys and Feyre, isn't it? I really quite like the end of this chapter. The High Lord, whose power had not scared me, whose wrath did not wreck me, and now I didn't know where that put me. Knee-deep in trouble seemed like a good place to start. I've just finished chapter 43, where Rhys and Feyre have an argument and now aren't talking. Everything was going so well, and then they had a bit of a row and she pretty much snapped at him about him. Oh, she was complaining because he protected her in a sort of violent manner. He smashed Moore's dad's hand for calling her a whore, and then she was all like, don't protect me like that, don't be like him, and he freaks out, she's like, I'm not like him, stop comparing me to him. And then she's all like, oh, you and this bloody mask, why can't you just be who you actually are? Are you afraid that people will see all of you and then not want you anymore? And then we have Feyre's realisation that she did want him, and she does want him, and she wants to tell him that, and she wants something with him, and she's willing to try, even though she's broken and healing, but she wants something. Amren's just told Feyre that tomorrow night is Starfall, So I think this chapter that I'm about to read might be Starfall. And I've just read chapter 44, which was Starfall. So obviously they have that little moment on the balcony where she paints the star on him, and it's all so cute, and I just want to cry, and I'm so happy for them, and I just want them to smooch. I love this book so much. I love these characters so much. They're just so adorable and heartwarming and heart-wrenching, and just my heart has feels. I just finished chapter 45, and holy hell, that was a chapter and a half. So Rhys has explained to Feyre everything that happened between his dad and Tamlin's dad, and how both of their families kind of slaughtered each other, and that's why they are enemies, but really neither of them particularly wanted it, but it's kind of how it happened, and she is just an emotional wreck at that point, and she is apologetic for never having known, etc, etc, and we see her using her powers a hell of a lot more, but still her powers are all very emotional. The end of chapter 46 saw Lucian turn up, and chapter 47 obviously showed us Feyre scaring him away, and she has realised that she doesn't feel bad, and she doesn't feel guilty, and she doesn't feel anything, and that scaring them off didn't make her feel guilty, and she's okay with it. And she had the fantastic line of, when you spend so long trapped in darkness, you find that the darkness begins to stare back, and she's just so great, isn't she? And we're getting so close to her admitting how much she wants Rhys. Just finished chapter 48, and chapter 48 is the chapter where they're in the tiny little inn in the mountains, and they have to share a bed together. It wasn't planned, and he pleasures her. That's pretty much everything that happens in that chapter. And she admits, like, I just want fun, I just want pleasure, and he kind of is a bit off-put by that because he loves her so much. But she said, like, I wonder if he saw it for the lie that it was, but we know that he doesn't, and it did upset him a little bit. I've just finished chapter 49, and I don't think my heart can cope. She has explained to Rhys how when she was back in her human home, she painted the night sky on her dresser, and said how she wondered if throughout everything she was never truly alone, and she was just waiting for him and for them and to be part of the night. And he said he was looking for her too, and adorable. By the way, they've just been ambushed by Hyben soldiers, and he's had all the ash arrows put in him. But she also said, I painted flowers for Elaine and fire for Nesta, blah blah blah. Nesta would have liked Valerius. I think Amryn and her would be fast friends, which obviously they do become later. They become quite close, very much similar to each other. She said, I think Elaine would like it too, though she'd probably cling to Asriel just to have some peace and quiet. She smiled at the thought at how handsome they would be together. Yeah, that happens too. But anyway, yeah, we're so close. So Rhys has all these ash injuries, so Feyre's about to go and find the cereal to discover how to heal him, and she's about to find out some vital information, and I'm very excited. But this is about to be the last chapter that me and Jess are going to read today, but I'm not sure if we'll actually be able to hold it at that. I've just finished chapter 50. And she caught the cereal, and she knows that Rhys is her mate, and she freaked out because he thought he knew what was best for her, and they all knew when they were keeping it from her and keeping her from stuff, and she freaked out, and Rhys is hurting because he loves her so much, and he said, like, I was just going to accept what little parts of you I could get, and my heart absolutely melts and I don't want to stop. So Moore's just taken Feyre up to the cottage in the mountains where only their family can get in and stuff, and Moore said to her, like, he wanted to tell you and it killed him not to, but he's never been as happy as he has been with you, and I don't think that's anything to do with you being his mate, pretty much her saying he loves you for you and blah blah blah. But Feyre's pissed, and Feyre needs some time, but we are so close. You know, chapter 52 is next, and that's so close to 54 and 55. Hello, I just finished chapter 52, where Feyre is up in the cabin in the woods hiding from Rhys because she knows that the mating bond and blah blah blah, and Moore's gone to see her, and she's been painting all over the house and stuff, and we have a little bit of history between Moore and Asriel. And Moore said, the issue actually wouldn't be me, it'd be him. I could peel off my clothes right in front of him and he wouldn't move an inch, blah blah blah, because he only ever sees himself as a bastard-born Illyrian. But we know that's not entirely true. The problem would also sort of be you, Moore, because you're into girls, but not that that's a problem. But, you know, in the more Asriel relationship, it's kind of a problem, isn't it? But yeah, she's spent the time in the cabin kind of mulling things over and thinking about what she's going to say to Rhys, and she realises that it's not that bad, and she treated him unfairly, and she told him she would never run away from him, and that's exactly what she did, and blah blah blah. Just finished chapter 53, a really short one where she's realised that she does see a future with Rhys, and she doesn't think that immortality is going to be so bleak and empty as she once thought it was, and then she said, oh, Moore was hammering on the door, but it wasn't Moore. And now we go into chapter 54. I'm gonna go and have a good time now. I've just finished chapter 54, and I don't even think I need to speak, because if you're watching this video then you've read this book. But you know the fame of chapter 54, and Rhys has just explained everything to her, and it's so raw and emotional, and I just love it. And I love all of the history and how he, like, everything at this point then slots into place. Everything you've read from this book and the previous book, everything just slots into place so perfectly, and I just love this chapter so much. But I'm not going to say any more than that, because I could go on for hours about a 14-page chapter. But yeah, anyway, I'm now about to read chapter 55, which is mine and Jess's last chapter of today, because we decided to do 4, because I had a funny feeling that if I was Jess and I'd just read chapter 54, I would want to read chapter 55, so I said we had to do 4 today. I've just finished chapter 55, and that's all I'm gonna say. I just finished chapter 57, where the queens have come again for them to show Valeries to them. So prior to this, obviously, Rhys and Feyre have been mated, and they went back to Valeries, and Cassian and Rhys had that massive fist fight to get it all out of Rhys' system, and then they went back to Feyre's human family home, where the queens were meeting them so they could show them the truth of Valeries to gain their trust, so that they could give them the book. But the queens were still bitches and didn't give them the book, but the younger queen smuggled the book in for them and gave it to them secretly, so that's a secret, but they now have the other side of the book. Rhys has opened up his home to Feyre's human family, and the final line of this chapter is absolutely adorable. Nesta looked between Rhys and Cassian and then to me. Despair still paled her face, but she bowed her head and said to me, "That was why you painted the stars on your drawer." I'm now up to chapter 60, so I've just finished chapter 59, and chapters 58 and 59 see Valeries being attacked by Hybern soldiers and the Ator and all of the other Ators. So obviously the human queens sold the information to Hybern for their immortality that they will later get. But obviously the Golden Queen had given them the book, so she was good, but then she got dropped from the sky and impaled on a spike, so she's now dead and had her eyeballs gouged out, so that was gross and horrible for her. Feyre became Feyre Cursebreaker, Defender of the Rainbow, and saved her people. And she really, got all her powers, on point with her water wolves and drowning people and, freezing the soldiers in the sky, and then when she burned the Ator to pieces, and she really kind of mastered the winnowing as well, and I feel like those 2 chapters are really key for Feyre's development as a fae and her, powers and stuff. Also very crucial to her development as soon-to-be a High Lady, to protect her people and show how powerful she is. Just finished chapter 61, and they're in Hybern, and they've got the 2 halves of the Book of Breathings, and Amren's cracked the code, and Feyre's about to try and nullify the cauldron, but obviously we know that's not going to work, and everything is about to go horribly wrong. Just finished chapter 62, and everything's gone horribly wrong because she put the 2 halves of the book together when she wasn't supposed to do that. And then Jurian's turned up and said, "You stupid fool," to Feyre. And obviously at this point we think that he's calling her a stupid fool for trying to nullify the cauldron, but I think he might be calling her a stupid fool for doing it wrong, because he's obviously on their side. Secretly. And I've just finished chapter 63, where the King of Hybern turns up, and then possibly the worst thing in the entire book happens, and Lucian and Tamlin step out of the shadows. And I think this is the part where, everyone goes mad, and this next chapter is where I just want to gouge his eyeballs and his throat and all of his internal organs out, because he's... And Jess is about to learn why we all hate Tamlin. And I've just finished chapter 64, so we now absolutely despise Tamlin and the King of Hybern, and our hearts are breaking for Rhys and Feyre as they're being torn apart, and we want to absolutely destroy Tamlin for his ridiculous, stupid bargain with the king to get back a woman that isn't even his possession. And then her sisters come through, gagged, because the king is obviously about to throw them into the cauldron, and everything just goes to shit, doesn't it? Just finished chapter 65, where Feyre's sisters get turned into Fae, and Lucian declares that Elaine is his mate. I noticed a lot of Tamlin's dialogue. He was being quite protective. He was saying, like, stop this madness, this wasn't part of our deal, you stop this. Like, he wasn't completely evil in that moment. I mean, he's still a dick for making the deal in the first place, but he was trying to help her sisters, even just a little bit. And we see Nesta's creation again, how she took more than the cauldron wanted to give, etc, etc. Asriel might die and Cassian might die. We know obviously it doesn't happen, but I'm so close to finishing, so I don't know if I'll actually film anymore or if I'll just film when I've finished. I'll see if anything like worth noting pops up. Just finished chapter 66, and Feyre and Rhys's acting is just like on point. It's perfect, and the way they just understand each other. I'm not sure if like their mental connection thing is working or not because of the king, but like she's explaining it to him and he's understanding, whether that's because he can actually hear it in his head or if he just knows her body language and like understands what she's doing. But she's freed them and she's going to tear Tamlin apart from the inside out. At this point in the book we don't know that, because the last words were, and the world cleaved in two as the bond snapped. And I've just finished the book. So in those final chapters we had obviously the bond snapping, everyone's kind of playing along, and although Mor and Cassian and Asriel don't really know like the extent to which they're playing, they understand Feyre's goodbye as she sacrifices herself for them pretty much. But obviously we then go to Rhysand's point of view and see him kind of explaining that he is heartbroken and there is that big empty space in their minds, but that was where the bargain was, and it was the bargain that broke, not the bond, because the bond is so deep within them that the king could never possibly find it. So there is that big empty space between them where the bargain once was, but the bond is still there. And then we go back to Feyre's point of view, and Lucian doesn't trust her, and her final, like, some of the final things she says was as if he knew they'd led a fox into the chicken coop and he could do nothing. And then the very last line, so Tamlin unwittingly led the High Lady of the Night Court into the heart of his territory, because we've just been told that she's High Lady of the Night Court as well. And then Amren and Mor are like, you mean to tell us that our High Lady is there with enemies, we go and get her now? And he's like, no, she's a spy. And Amren's like, she's not a spy, she is the High Lady. And there we go, that's the end. I love this book so much, and I'm very sad that it's over, but I'm also really happy that me and Jess have got through it all, and now we can start with ACOMAF, because that's exciting. I loved it as much the second time round as I did the first time, and I didn't really think that I wouldn't, but some parts were really weird, and it made me really happy to do. And I'm not gonna like do a recap because you've just sat and watched this whole video, so you know how I feel, but I loved it and I'm really excited to start the second one. So there you go. That is it for this video. If you have enjoyed, please give it a thumbs up, chat to me down in the comments, and if you fancy subscribing, I'm always eternally grateful for that. I'll see you next time. Bye!